Welcome to Making Sense of the Madness. We got a great show lined up for you today. I'm going to be talking to my good buddy Joe Allen on a topic that you guys that have been watching know is extremely important to me, and that is transhumanism. He is the author of Dark Aeon. I got to spend a little time with him. We got the book right here, read a bit of this as well. We're going to be talking about AI, Musk, transhumanism, and beyond. Buckle up and get ready to make sense of the madness. And we are back. We're with Joe Allen, the author of Dark Aeon. Joe, first of all, thank you so much for joining us. We got to spend some time together over in California, and I didn't know much about your background, but you and I share a bunch of interests other than transhumanism. It was pretty cool to find out you're also kind of a gypsy, a little bit of a nomad. You've been all around. Before we even get started, what was the first, I read the beginnings of your book. You talk about video games. I remember these same things when I was rocking on the ColecoVision, the Atari 7800, even pre-Nintendo days. What was it that triggered your interest in transhumanism initially on that journey?
Well, and Jason, great to be here. And it was a blast hanging out. Look forward to the next time. There wasn't necessarily a single moment. There were a lot of different experiences, books, things like that, along the way gave me a sense of foreboding about the direction of technology. As far as transhumanism itself goes, I think that really my first deep introduction to the topic outside of Timothy Leary's early stuff, his later work, but really kind of early to the concepts of transhumanism, was Ray Kurzweil, The Age of Spiritual Machines, and also Eric Davis, his book Technosis. I came across both of those in the year 2000, and we were coming up at the on the other side of the new millennium, and there had been so many different failed prophecies from many of my compatriots in the Southeast, the Southern Baptists, the Seventh-day Adventists. Everybody had their own very specific version of the end of the world that would happen. And when that fizzled out in a very lame way, I was just kind of curious, well, now what? And it was intriguing. I read Kurzweil, I read Eric Davis. Of course, I read, years before this, Ted Kaczynski's small tract, Industrial Society and Its Future. And those ideas and many others were boiling around in my head. Then 9/11 hit. The global surveillance state was openly declared. The internet was now, in a very obvious way, a kind of hive mind that was being used by intelligence agencies to gather information and also to disseminate propaganda. And, I've never really shaken the sense that these technologies don't represent progress so much as they represent systems of control.
So for me, it's a little bit similar. I would say the trigger point was 9/11, because before that, I thought this stuff was going to be the best thing since breakfast. I was disappointed that at the turn of the century, we didn't have virtual reality like we were being promised, right? I remember we were going to have virtual reality. Obviously, the flying car was out there. We were promised all these things, and it was a slow drip. And it was only after, not even after 9/11, but after I realized we were being lied to about 9/11, that I started looking at the biometrics and the artificial intelligence and the implantation as something that was negative. Because just like you said, around 2000, there were a lot of doomsayers. I grew up in a very Christian household, and really the only idea of a new world order that I had ever really heard of. You remember, this is pre-internet days. Maybe you'd hear about it once in a while on the television in some kind of like nefarious sense on a show, but it was in church, or the mark of the beast, or chipped humanity. And I dismissed a lot of that. I thought, even as a young man, I saw a lot of deception inside the church. I think that even religious people would agree there is a lot of that. There are a lot of grifters in that arena. And I kind of turned my head on that and just thought, no, this stuff is all really good. But then once you realize that you're being lied to by the mainstream media, that your government is willing to kill maybe thousands of its own citizens to kill millions more in conquest and implement this technology, it became alarming to me. In fact, before that, I thought Kurzweil was a genius. I had also,
interesting.
Yeah, I had also, and look, there's no doubt the guy is an extremely intelligent guy. But I had, seen lectures on the age of spiritual machines. I've never actually read the book. Anybody can go to C-SPAN now and actually watch one of those almost 2-hour lectures. That is a huge turning point. And that really reflects why we should all be very, I would say, apprehensive on embracing technology that is brought to us by world-class liars that have shown themselves time and time again, Joe.
Yeah, there's a lot of overlap there with Ray Kurzweil and what happened on 9/11. It's not direct connection so much as just the loose connection. So, as you well know, Kurzweil would go on to be an R&D director at Google. And from its beginning, Google began with government funding. Most of these companies in big tech, that's the case. Elon Musk, of course, that's the case, at least when he really took off. And, Google was a backdoor for a lot of the surveillance. This was something that many people were talking about. Back in those days for me, my daily read was blacklisted news. What's the guy's name? Owen, whatever. Anyway, he actually had me on. He called. I did a call in on his show at one point. But, I would read blacklisted news. I would read global research, and I would read disinformation. And those, all of them, very skeptical of the state, very skeptical of these corporations, raising a lot of alarms about the surveillance. But because it was so fringe, you would tell people about this. You'd be like, man, what are you doing? You can't put your personal life in your emails. What do you think these advertisements are that they're putting in your emails? They're literally scraping the content of your mind, blah, 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 blah. And, you sound like a lunatic. That hasn't changed all that much. But then, 2013, you had the release of the Snowden files and the PRISM program. And suddenly it was, without question, this is what these systems are being used for, at least partially, to surveil the population. And the implication is that surveillance is being used to craft better and better propaganda to manipulate the population. But it was very weird. On the one hand, it was vindicating to have Snowden come out and Glenn Greenwald to really push this story through The Guardian. On the other hand, basically nothing changed. Nobody really took it seriously. And you saw Republicans and Democrats just, moving forward with their support of the intelligence agencies and all of the big tech companies that are wrapped up in this. And whatever degree of competition or disagreement there is between big tech and the government, and there certainly seems to be at least some on the surface. You'll recall like Project Maven, the military program under the DoD, and Google employees threatened to walk out if Google continued to work on it. But these are very specific employees. That's a very specific project. There's so much else going on. But in general, I think that one of the curses, I guess, of being a paranoiac is that you're oftentimes going to be tempted to overestimate the power of your enemies or the power of the system. You're oftentimes going to overestimate the degree of collusion or the degree of kind of centralized intelligence. The paranoid mind, of which I occupy, tends to see, it's always looking for something, right? Like when I was a kid, it was Masons and Satanists. As I got older, and Catholics, of course, and as I got older, the more sophisticated versions of it, the Illuminati and the transhumanists and the Gnostics and so on and so forth. But whatever degree of accuracy is in that, most people who are normal and don't share that kind of paranoiac instinct are going to think you're crazy. They're going to think that you're worse than the systems or the individuals you're describing. And so here we sit, worse than the most evil tyrant, worse than the most disgusting and insidious cabal.
Well, you know what? Here's the thing. The Snowden thing was big at the time because, again, it brought things into the public arena, almost like when the re-release of these Epstein files, which really didn't have a lot of new things out there, brought people in and started having them question more and kind of become aware of some of the other aspects of the case. The truth of the matter is you can go pre-9/11. It's in the court system. Anybody can look it up. Hepting versus AT&T. In fact, we might bring that up in the next segment. And already you had these data centers at AT&T, all the large telecommunication companies, where the NSA was siphoning off all the data coming through. And in real time, they still had keyword software on your phone calls, Promise and Carnivore. In fact, Promise is the software that Robert Maxwell actually got in trouble selling off to other intelligence agencies. So that level of surveillance was already out there pre-9/11, obviously got more sophisticated, but as you said, nothing was done. And as far as I know, as far as media coverage on television anyway, that got 2 segments. There was a long PBS segment, which I included a lot of, with Norris Insight Systems being the data centers and how they processed it. Gone over there. And then to his credit, before he went completely insane, Keith Olbermann did one story on Hepting versus AT&T, and anybody can look it up. But again, you bring that up, you're a crazy person. Back in the day, I'll say this though, Joe, when I didn't have a little magic box, right? When I didn't have this little guy, it was a lot tougher. You had to get somebody to sit down to a desktop. Then there probably wasn't a video of what you wanted. You had to get them to read something. I don't know. With the magic box, as time went on, I'll never forget my first moment. This is how technology can empower humanity, everybody. It was a fold phone. It had one of those little LCD screens. It was one of those first ones that was competing with the Razor. Yep. And I had loaded some 3GP files on there, everybody, these small little video files. And we were out in San Francisco, and the robot guy, the guy that does the robot dance, he was wondering what the hell we were all doing, because a bunch of people were actually dressed up in revolutionary gear. We had a big 9/11 commission book that was giant with huge holes in it. We were throwing it in to the San Francisco Bay. It was before the Tea Party movement got hijacked, really. Anybody can look it up. It predates what went on, where they were really making fun of Ron Paul because people like us were behind him. And he comes up to me, he's like, dude, what is all this? And I explained to him that a third building, Building 7, housed the Secret Service, the Central Intelligence Agency, the NSA, all sorts of goodies in there at the Securities and Exchange Commission, was in New York City on that day. And I'm like, did you know that thing just came down? He's like, what are you talking about? And I threw it up on my phone and I just showed it to him. And I'm like, that building's 47 stories high. I go, look at that one. I go, that one's about 18. I go, think about how big. And he just like looked at me. He goes, thanks for dropping the knowledge, my brother. I appreciate it. And that's how you got to use these things. You got to be human beings, but it's tough. Even to this day, people like you and I are marginalized, often because people still glamour onto one group, some mystical alliance that runs the world. And that's not really what we have. We have a consortium of interests that have built this, through their separate governments and non-government institutions that are now globalized. I mean, you think that's kind of an accurate perception?
Absolutely. And it's a much more difficult worldview to wrap your head around. As I always say, a conspiracy of a small group of men, and perhaps women, perhaps they, thems, who are in charge of everything. If you could just locate them and eliminate them, neutralize them in some way, well, then the problem is solved, and that's it. And it's very easy to imagine one group or one man behind all of this. It's much more difficult to look at the very complicated network of powers and their collusion, their competition with one another. That is not only harder to conceptualize, but of course, a much more difficult problem to address, to solve. And you take out Silicon Valley, you would still have Seattle, you would still have Boston, you would still have New York, you would still have London, you'd have Tel Aviv, so on and so forth, and of course Shenzhen, Beijing, on and on. If you somehow took out all of those machines, first off, Kaczynski style, as Kaczynski readily admitted, most people wouldn't survive because most people are dependent on those machines for their life. They don't know how to live outside of that machine. Is that worth it? Mass death for freedom? And I don't think so. For one thing, as much as I do have, some survivalist skills, it would be very, very uncomfortable. And I might not make it. So
it's almost the Ozymandias perspective from The Watchmen. Like, you know what? And I'm not down with it either. We got to kill a bunch of people to cut the systems off so that nobody can kill a bunch of people, right? And a lot of these guys are very much the ends justify the means. I call them the predator class for a reason. The people that are able to make their way into a billionaire or maybe even a trillionaire class at this point. They're vicious social climbers. The Peter Thiels of the world, the Henry Kissingers before that, to get to that level, which is really upper management. I mean, the people that actually own the banking systems, they're probably still calling the shots, in my opinion, again. But if you look at like the guys like Thiel, they're sometimes heroes to people on the conservative movement and on the right. This is a guy who helped bring in PayPal. This is a guy who helped bring in Facebook. This is Palantir guy. This is a guy that got caught doing offshore human experimentation to try to cure herpes. And some people will say, well, that's benevolent. I'm like, well, is it really? We got to take a break, Joe. Before we take that break, I want to let people know they can get the book, Dark Aeon, Transhumanism and the War Against Humanity, at an incredible discount right now, below $25. That is extremely awesome. I can't recommend this book enough. Joe Allen is with us. We're taking that break. We're coming right back. It is Making Sense of the Madness. And we are back with Joe Allen. Joe, we were kind of talking about Peter Thiel and how some of these people have their hands in some of the most nefarious, secretive projects out there, and they're being deified by certain political individuals, when really, I think they need to be questioned more. I think they say a lot of the right things, right? But Peter Thiel is a very powerful guy. He's on the steering committee of Bilderberg. He's there with Alex Karp, who he brought in via Palantir. That's one of the Five Eyes mechanisms that we know about via the Snowden documentation. So what's your feeling on a guy like Thiel in particular?
Before I go into Thiel, I just want to say that, another thing that is very, very difficult in regard to looking at elites, be they financial elites, political elites, intellectual elites, or technological elites, I don't really believe that they are all evil, self-consciously evil. Their actions may lead to evil results, but I have no way of knowing what the ratio is. But I've met enough billionaires and enough people in tech to be completely convinced that a significant number of them think that what they're doing is good. It's good for humanity, that this is a better world. That's also very, very difficult, because if your enemies are evil, then A, you are correct, right? You're good, they're evil. And B, it justifies whatever means may be necessary to take them out of power. If they're good, but your interests don't align, they're just it's a conflict of two parties acting in good faith. That's a much more difficult prospect. So with Thiel, I wouldn't go so far as to say I think Thiel is good, but evil. I don't know. I know Palantir is responsible for a great portion of the power that the security state wields, not only in the U.S. but across the globe. You've got they contract with England and various other powers abroad, and their system is one of their many systems, but like the primary projects, AI projects, are to sift through all of the surveillance data and make sense of it. It's called Palantir because, it's named after the Palantiri in Lord of the Rings. And, Palantiri were these stones that both good and evil wizards, Sauron among them, would use to surveil, Middle Earth. I'm not a big Lord of the Rings fan, by the way. I mean, it's good. But anyhow, so there's a certain degree of, there's a sinister element that can't be ignored. Of course, Thiel, was one of the first investors in Neuralink. And after his falling out with Musk, he also bankrolled BlackRock Neurotech, which is really far, far ahead of Neuralink as far as the sophistication of the technology and the number of brains that have been, plugged at this point. Although I think Neuralink, as we go forward with more human trials, Neuralink will very quickly surpass BlackRock Neurotech. But we'll see. But, Thiel's political ideals, let's just take him at his word. Very much a libertarian and yet also, a nationalist, kind of a Western chauvinist. Up to a point, I am in alignment with those views. I really like J.D. Vance these days. I think just as far as politicians go, he's among the more forthright and certainly however sincere or insincere he is, the kinds of policies and the kinds of rhetoric that he is going with are in alignment with my own. So, and he, of course, was bankrolled by Thiel. It's a mixed bag. Does that mean that he's owned by Thiel? Does that mean that J.D. Vance is a crypto transhumanist and that soon he'll want us to all get chipped? I don't think so. Politics is very, very dirty. And anybody in politics, as you mentioned before, with banking or any of these sorts of high-level positions, anybody going in is going to have thick skin, and they're going to have to get their hands dirty. They're going to have to deal with, and in many cases, ally with people that we would consider to be filth. So, and I don't necessarily, I think among all of the kind of big tech transhumanists, and Peter Thiel, I would say, is big tech. I mean, he's certainly got the money, and even if his companies are smaller relative to like Google or Amazon, I'll put him in that class. And I've listened to endless interviews with Musk and read endless posts from Musk. I've read Bill Gates and, of course, listened to endless interviews with him. Jeff Bezos, same. Mark Zuckerberg, same. Of all of them, Peter Thiel is the most articulate, the most, I would say, convincing in his argument that technology is going to bring about the best and not the worst. But I totally disagree with him on that. I totally disagree with the concept that human beings, in his conception, are in essence creating some approximation of the kingdom of God or the city of God. Right, as described by Augustine or in Revelation, the city, this New Jerusalem. I don't think that's what we're doing. I think it's much closer to the beast. And so whether Thiel believes anything he's saying, and I think he believes most of what he's saying probably, it doesn't matter if some of it aligns with me. Same with someone like, say, Mark Andreessen. It doesn't matter if he's anti-communist and pro-American nationalist. If we create a wall-to-wall technocracy in America in which artificial intelligence is held up as the primary authority on what is and isn't real, then in the case of Andreessen, artificial intelligence has the final say on who lives and dies on the battlefield. I think that sort of world is just simply a nightmare, and whatever good intentions or ill intentions that they have, these technocratic billionaires are at the best case scenario, they're wrong-headed. Worst case scenario, they really are the kind of black-robed cabal and doing secret satanic rituals. And everything that we see out here is nothing more than the manifestation of the works of demons. And I'm not saying that's not that way. Let's just say that there's a certain degree of intellectual distance that one has to have to remain sane.
I love the way that you put that, because I always stick to what I can prove. And like you said, you kind of alluded to this in the first segment. You went down all those little rabbit holes of secret societies and religions and cabals that are supposed to rule the world. And really, that's why I made Invisible Empire and New World Order Defined, is because, I found organizations that I saw shared a worldview, It was not quite a religious one. At the same time, some of these organizations, such as the Bohemian Grove, obviously engaged in ritualistic behavior, and as younger men,
Yeah.
skull and bones. Whether they believe in that stuff, I don't know. I have their own writings, and the owl is their deity for its wisdom and predatory nature, the ability to see in the dark. They've got the weaving spiders, come not here, basically. Don't you dare collude or work against us here. We're here to work together. We've got a unified vision of some sort. I do believe a lot of those people do think that they're actually benevolent. I think a lot of them are atheistic as well. I think they think a lot of it's nonsense. But I also believe that at the end of the day, and one of the reasons that this topic is really so near and dear to my heart, that they can live forever. Whether that's biologically or some other way. And that's illustrated even in the past with the idea of even cryogenics, right? And I'm going to freeze my body, or I'm going to freeze my head. I'm going to try to come back later. There are some now more advanced methods of that. Some people are still evangelizing that as well. Now we're talking about de-aging. And then once again, you mentioned Kurzweil, who is a huge evangelizer of this idea, and it approaching actually very quickly, was hired by Google.
He ain't getting any younger.
Well, again, Kurzweil's a guy that I remember in 2004, PBS had put out a documentary called The Worldwide Mind. And this was another big moment to see how far we had actually come and what these people were actually trying to do. And Kurzweil back then was talking about a world in which he was first of all, he was going to supplement himself. This is a smart guy. It's like, supplements probably work. He's going to exercise. But he's not only going to be able to live forever, but the curve is going to come up so high that eventually he's going to be able to resurrect his dead father, who he's going to travel with as a being of light throughout the multiverse, I guess. At the time, it was the universe then, but that's expanded. So I'm like, whoa, this is a bit wild. But that guy's the head of the immortality division. You mentioned it, essentially, the Calico Labs of Google, where they're not just trying to stop aging, they're trying to reverse it, Joe.
Is he the head? I knew he was involved, but I wasn't aware he was heading up Calico.
Let's see. We'll look it up live to tape, everybody. Calico Kurzweil. What position? Position. And boom. See, this is the magic right here. So here's
the magic box.
Yes, the magic boxes. So Calico Company, that's the head of R&D. Why is Calico? Come on. You're not going to give me Kurzweil's position off the top? Man.
Google ain't what she used to be.
And that's the craziest thing. I should have been able to get that on the first, right? Again, it's so smart.
One way or the other, certainly Ray Kurzweil is the guru of the concept of immortality, whatever form it is, at Google. Many people, he definitely did a lot of important work in machine learning as it relates to natural language processing. A lot of his work would be bundled into what is now Lambda or Bard or even Gemini, at least as a contributor. But his main role, as I understand it from people at Google, his main role is as guru, as an ideological figure. His involvement with Singularity University, which Google partners with, it's primarily to train future technologists in the kind of dogma might be putting it too strongly, but certainly in the core belief systems of transhumanism. And what really alarmed me about Kurzweil and his vision back in 2000, reading The Age of Spiritual Machines, the vision that he described was very much just a totalizing vision. It was one in which you would not escape. And so to me, there is something very rotten at the core of his belief system. It's if you want to use lefty terminology, it's colonialist in its essence. It's saying that the technologically superior beings will inevitably overcome those who are purely biological, making them either irrelevant or just simply absorbing them against their will. And his ultimate vision, these nanobot swarms coming out, like I just imagine them being kind of farted out of the earth from secret bunkers. But, as they, turn all non-computing matter into computronium and go out into the stars, I mean, it sounds like the spread of a disease. It sounds like a nuclear reactor that's spilling its radioactive contents across the planet. And so, yeah, that totalizing aspect of it is very in your face. And it's bizarre to me that Kurzweil gets all of this adulation, public adulation from, PBS, C-SPAN, his various media appearances. It's all softballs all day long. And he just simply espouses these views that human beings are going to become a large sort of eusocial insect-like Borg. And let's say that that's possible. Well, then that's hell on earth. Let's say it's not possible. Let's say that his reach is further than his grasp, as Hugh Hefner would say of Playboy. I think that, and by the way, I'd never really thought about this, but the concept of reach and grasp in the hand with Playboy, I never put that together. Clever on Hugh's part, but grasp. Anyway, with Ray Kurzweil. The whole concept of a totalizing technological system that is godlike, that is benevolent, that's sort of spiritual in its nature, that's conscious. If it's only an approximation, let's say they get 30% of the way there, they're able to take control of 30% of the world's informational, financial, military systems, medical systems, and this Borg-like cult centered around a few key individuals and a few key ideas. They could easily make life hell for the 70% that remain. So, and I fear we're already very close to that when you look at the totality of all big tech, the various governmental systems that utilize their systems, and the spread of these ideas. So,
Joe, we got to take a break, but I want to get to that because I think that's really important. That the idea that this is just going to happen is very authoritarian in nature and very against humanity and free will as well, as saying you will assimilate. There's some other aspects of what Kurzweil's talking about that are also extremely alarming. I want to go over that, and I want to go over where we are right now in society with AI, in the post-truth world, what's out there. The book is Dark Aeon, Transhumanism and the War Against Humanity. We will be back after this with more Making Sense of the Madness. And we are back with Joe Allen, and we were talking about Ray Kurzweil. Now, here are some other aspects of his vision that are extremely alarming. Number one, he talks about a post-carbon world. And obviously, carbon is what is openly trying to be regulated right now in the name of climate change. Now, Kurzweil is one of those people that is not a person that calls for population control. He actually says there could be much more, that's kind of the allure. He's like, no, we're all going to be able to print stuff and have whatever we want, and we're not overpopulated, but don't worry. We're going to create a non-carbon future. So it's very diametrically opposed. Now, on top of that, he also, in the age of spiritual machines, his viewpoint has somewhat shifted, but he basically says that we're going to create entities, not that necessarily are human or are having quote-unquote spiritual experiences, but that will be able to convince us that they in fact are. And then we are going to start giving them rights, and this will be a big part of the transition. Now, in order for this to occur, you kind of have to pass the Turing test. And that brings me to my next topic, Adrian Dittman. So I know that you have now looked into this a little bit. And for those that have not looked into it, Adrian Dittman is this character, if you will, this person, if you will, or perhaps something else on Twitter, maybe even an amalgamation of an Elon Musk avatar. And look, technology's big.
I can become a voice-modulated Elon Musk avatar with the push of a button. Not quite as good as Dittman,
but it's there. So I actually debated Adrian Dittman. We also talked about base reality. I also brought up BlackRock Neurotech, which we might get into in a bit. Adrian Dittman jumped into a debate on Elon Musk between Alex Jones and David Icke on the positive aspects of Musk and the negative aspects of Musk. Joe, you've kind of dipped your toe in this now for a little bit. What is your opinion on this Dittman situation?
As to the identity of Dittman, I really doubt that it's Elon Musk. But if it turns out that it is, it wouldn't surprise me, I suppose. The world has become so bizarre. What really intrigued me about both, I listened to a bit of the debate with Alex Jones and Ike and Dittman, and I listened to the first half of your debate with Dittman. What strikes me about this character, whoever he is, I don't think that he is an AI. I think that he is undoubtedly a human being, but it could be wrong. I don't think he's using voice modulation, but I have no way of proving that, so who knows? At this stage of the game, the only way to really be able to prove it would be to have a sophisticated AI to detect it, and I have not yet invested in that, though that's going to be maybe next on my list. The ideas that he's putting forward, though, I think are probably the most important. With all due respect to Mr. Jones, I think his deference to Dittman and his ideas, Jones has been kind of moving in that direction in recent months, maybe recent years, and I just wasn't aware. But he's increasingly comfortable with the idea of transhuman technology, so long as it's good guys doing it. Good guys like Elon Musk. They're going to do it the right way. Now, I disagree wholeheartedly. I told him this on his show. I explained my position that as everybody's freaking out about what Yuval Noah Harari's saying, they really need to be freaking out about what Elon Musk is doing. But Dittman's, kind of pro technology approach, he's very articulate. I think that he's a strong voice for that side. But it shows all the same sort of naivety about the positive end results of all this. He goes with the idea. He chided David Icke that you're worried about nanobots, and yet you're probably absorbed in a screen all day long, and you're coming through the screen now. That's something that I've argued many times, and I agree with wholeheartedly. The difference between me and somebody like Dittman is he thinks it's good, and he thinks that it's better that we move towards more direct interfaces, be it brain implants or nanobots or whatever. But if I could hone in on one key element that was discussed both between you and Dittman and Jones and Ike, the simulation theory, which I'm with you. I guess we're part of the based crowd here in base reality. I think the best assumption is that this is base reality, and the consequences of missteps in base reality should be taken very seriously. But that notion, that notion of a simulation, that intelligent design for computer nerds, really interesting on two different levels. One, the way in which it provides a religious worldview for people who are otherwise atheists, right? It provides a creator or creators. It puts us in this sort of cosmic hierarchy in which we are now kind of like Mormon co-creators, creating our own simulations and our own systems that will go on in this long chain of being. And I think that there is something very striking about it. Sam Altman, in his interview with Lex Friedman, said that the simulation theory is the religion of Silicon Valley, and it does seem to be very prevalent. It basically slides directly into those cognitive modules that the traditional religious person would hold. So that religious element, that it is religion, is really fascinating to me. But I think the second element is that, much like religious systems, all the way back to the hunter-gatherers, projected their vision of the material world out onto the cosmos, so that hunter-gatherers, if you look at their cave paintings, and as you see them move more and more into the civilization states of Babylon and Egypt, they're projecting animals, they're projecting plants out onto the cosmos, these anthropomorphic or zoomorphic beings, and that was their world that they inhabited, and they saw the cosmos as being reflective of that. Later on, you would have, esoteric Jews and esoteric Muslims who saw the universe as being inscribed with the Torah or with the Quran, respectively, and and a number of others who saw the nature of the universe in what they were most absorbed in, which was writing. Same with the Pythagorean cult. The Pythagoras saw the world as being composed of numbers. And then now in an age, and then, well, I'll add one more, the kind of Cartesian viewpoint that, in an age of machines, more and more people saw the universe less as an organism and more as a machine, just like the machines they're surrounded in. And now people are completely absorbed and immersed in digital reality. And it should be no surprise then that people have projected their digital worlds that they're immersed in, be it video games, the internet, social media, all of it, onto the rest of the cosmos. I understand, especially Nick Bostrom's argument as to why mathematically we most likely live in a simulation. Elon Musk basically takes that up, and perhaps Dittman follows the same lineage. But I don't have a lot of beef with it personally, because people have all sorts of wild beliefs, and I'm not going to run around beating them over the head, telling them that they're wrong unless they come at me. But I do think that it's somewhat dangerous because it normalizes the simulation that most people already live in. And that is one that is by and large constructed by powers not from the ground up, not as grassroots, but by people who sit at the apex of society, feeding these realities through these digital systems into our brains. I think that should horrify people on a very deep level, and people, for the most part, have just simply become accustomed to it. And here we are. And here we are, here with these cameras in our faces on the screen.
Again, I like technology. Look, you're probably thousands of miles away from me right now. We're in real time, high definition, having this conversation. It's empowering humanity. Information actually travels wirelessly on all levels. You know what I mean? You just need a receiver and something to transceive it as well. With the simulation, and the reason that I bring up also the metaverse as the simulation when I debate Dittman, and the multiverse as well. They're one and the same to me, because you started that whole point with the fact that actions have consequences. We're in base reality. This idea essentially takes that idea away, because there is an infinite amount of views playing out in an infinite amount of realities, either in the multiverse, right, in this quantum realm where everything is happening at once. It also kind of eviscerates the idea of free will, or in a simulation, because if it's one simulation, look what simulations we run. We run simulations of everything all the time, as much as possible, with different variables. So you're essentially taking away the idea that what you do affects everything, and it plays into people's vanity, man. And like you said, it's almost like, I hate to say it, but to me, it's an inversion of the truth, and it's very satanic in the do as thou wilt mentality. And I'm not a religious guy, everybody. I want to make that really, really clear. We got to take another break. I do want to remind people they need to go get the book, Dark Aeon, Transhumanism and the War Against Humanity. Also, the audiobook is available if you just want to jog down the line and learn all about transhumanism, BlackRock, neurotech, and more. It's Making Sense of the Madness, back after this. And we are back with Joe Allen. Joe, I love these conversations of the tether of reality, if you will. And to me, when I talk about the post-truth world, first of all, I didn't coin the term. It was a term that was actually discussed on the agenda of the 2017 Bilderberg meeting. And they were using it much more in a different context, in the context of misinformation, disinformation, what would become malinformation, and really censorship. But as of today, I really feel like with software like HeyGen, an avatar generator, that now I can record a 2.5-minute video, speak, and all of a sudden I can type in what I'd like to say in 20 different languages, and it looks just like me, and it's photorealistic. We just play a little with the voice mod technology. Sora is on the horizon, again, text prompt video. Do you kind of share my idea that we really can't believe anything we see and hear anymore, and that's a true problem, creating a post-truth world, or are we not quite there yet?
I don't think we're there yet, but if it's that good and you don't have AI software to detect it, then you wouldn't know. Much like the argument that we live in a simulation. If it was that realistic, you just simply wouldn't know. And I think that psychological disconnection from reality, from the realities that we're absorbing through our screens, on the one hand, would like to be optimistic that the more deepfakes and AI generated material flood into the digital space, the more skeptical people will become, the less married they will be to the realities getting pumped into their eyeballs and into their neurons. I would like to think that would be the case. I don't think that will be the case. I think that just like in the past where you've always had bullshitters, and just like in the past centuries where you've always had sophisticated propaganda, now you have a new addition to that, just a new layer on top of that. And people have always known that bullshitters were around, and yet it would seem the masses are primed to eat up the bullshit. People have always known that, government propaganda is there for the most part. And yet, on down to 2 seconds ago, I would say the masses have, eagerly lapped up that as well. Or even the dissident propaganda. It's a real problem on our side of the aisle how many dissidents are just completely full of shit. And people eat that up much more readily than seemingly the more complex truths that others, such as yourself, are trying to bring. So in essence, I think that whether we're there, we're going to be very, very soon. And as that happens, what I see as the most likely future is that authorities as they exist now, be they Google, be they Amazon, be they New York Times, Community Notes, Fox News, whatever, these authoritative institutions will then be kind of responsible for sifting out what is and isn't real in a world that's flooded with unreality. And they will just simply consolidate power around that. But I also believe there'll be plenty of intelligent and independent thinkers that will also be at that process, that do not necessarily trust wholeheartedly those institutions. So I kind of see it as a continuation of what we have now, but accelerated by way of technology and so much more surreal. If you are not convinced that this is me talking to you, that is a level of delusion, because it is me talking to you, I promise. But also a level of confusion that humanity really hasn't experienced before. So as much as it's in the same lineage, we're going next level with this. We are going deep into the matrix, so to speak.
Well, I think in about 18 months, we are going to be at that Running Man level where all of a sudden Jesse Ventura can put the tights on again and murder Arnold Schwarzenegger on live television. And it's not Arnold Schwarzenegger, it's some other poor sap. I mean, we've already seen the deep fake stuff and obviously people doing comedic things with it. I had just went over, this is HeyGen right here. All of these are AI avatars based on previous video. And again, you're speaking one of 20 different languages. This is a key prompt and it's available commercially now for the last couple of months. I think that's going to evolve rather quickly. Who's going to have access to Sora? I don't know. NVIDIA is going through the roof because their AI is able to take PDFs and constructs in CAD and actual build virtual factories before they're built. And then as they're built, mirror them in real time, running all those fun little simulations we were talking about to make sure that maintenance is kept up and productivity is improved. A lot of that productivity improvement has to do with automation. So we got to take one last break. When we come back, I want to talk about some of these technologies that are pushing us into this transhumanist and some say post-human future, especially automation, blockchain, universal basic income, and yes, neural implants. It's all here. Final segment of Making Sense of the Madness with Joe Allen after this. And we are back with Joe Allen, final segment. Joe, always a pleasure. An hour always flies by when we're talking. Right now, we're seeing more and more automation than ever. We're also seeing blockchain and crypto being talked about more than ever. Bitcoin, Ethereum being moved into the ETF arena, BlackRock glomming onto that. It's not just the housing market, it's that, it's neurotech, as you said, and so much more. I see a lot of overlap with these technologies. You know, when we talk about OpenAI and Sam Altman, and he gets his first seat at the Bilderberg table, then he launches WorldCoin. Of course, it had been in the works, but WorldCoin is that biometric, I am a human because deepfakes are out there, use me, use me, use me. universal basic income token. So what is your view on these technologies right now? Am I correct in that they are overlapping and pushing us into this transhumanist future?
First thing I want to say about Bitcoin, I personally don't, I have no aesthetic love of digital currency, and I don't really, I see the promise of Bitcoin not only for currency, but also for, information transfer. My book, Dark Aeon, was co-published by a company called Canonic XYZ. They only sell books in Bitcoin. The digital edition of the book is actually published on the blockchain, so it has a hash. So any alteration of the digital book would be easily detected, because it would then have new a new hash, I guess. You'd have to speak with Artie and Tola about the details of this. I'm still, like I say, I'm not a huge fan of crypto or digital currency as a norm anyway, but over the last year and a half, speaking with Artie and Tola, I do understand the concept of Bitcoin as being a kind of weapon, and that just as we have Second Amendments, or the Second Amendment for guns, we're going to need a sort of Second Amendment for compute if Bitcoin will continue to be a means of exchange and a means of communication outside of the black rocks and outside of the federal government. So that being said, check out Canonic XYZ. A very, very interesting group of people. A lot of great books there, mine included.
Let me just stop you there for just a second, because those evangelists all talk about that and how that's a reality. Let me show you why that's really not a reality. And maybe you got the dark Bitcoin chains and you've got the dead man switch with it. This recently happened. It hasn't gotten a lot of fanfare, but German police seized 2.1 billion in Bitcoin from file sharers. Now that's 50,000 Bitcoins. So let me explain the very few details we have on this one. Those guys were running pirate sites up till, I believe, 2013. From what I understand, they were taking cash. They then invested that cash in Bitcoin, and they had 50,000 Bitcoin worth over $2 billion. Somehow, the German authorities got them in a room, got their keys from them, and took their Bitcoin. And the bottom line is, you can sit there and be like, nobody's got my keys, blah, 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 blah. Soon as the hammer comes out of the closet and your thumb's on the table and that first finger is broken, you're probably giving up those keys. I mean, that's just my opinion. I think it does. I think it does have a certain amount of security. I got a little Bitcoin. I'm glad it's going up right now. I'm not trying to, crap all over it. But at the same time, we have to live in the real world where actions have consequences.
Yeah, I wouldn't, like I say, to me, it's somewhat alien and aesthetically unappealing. But I do think that, the same argument could be made of gold, of cash, of land, whatever. If you're in a situation where the authorities have you and they're threatening to put you away for life, or they're cutting off little slivers of your fingers or other appendages until you give up your keys. That's true of any material good. The decentralized nature of Bitcoin and to some extent, if you do it properly, the privacy inherent with it, but it's very difficult to do. I see the advantages, but I'm not a Bitcoiner. But real quick, just going back to the original topic, right? The idea of the overlap between the push for total automation of everything. Amazon openly wants to do this. Many companies openly want to do this. The concept of universal basic income to allow people to live and eat and play, even though they are part of what Harari would call the useless class, and the prevalence of digital currency and really cryptocurrency. I mean, that's what the central bank digital currencies are by and large blockchain based. I definitely see a situation in which all of these different forces are aligning to create the kinds of digital prisons that the most paranoid people were talking about in the 80s and 90s. It's definitely seems to be right around the corner. And so when you hear guys like Jensen Huang, the CEO of NVIDIA, talking about data ownership and that you own your data and that if the big corporations are going to use it, then they have to pay you for it. I like the idea. But I also could see a world in which that's all you have is your data, because you don't have any other economic value. You have basically been automated away automated out of the economy. And so the last thing that you have is your personal data for some extra, whatever, crypto ducats to get you by. I in general, I see whether they are actually sinister people or whether they are well-meaning people, it doesn't matter. The world in which they envision us as being basically little nodes, little, data points, and the world that we inhabit being primarily the creation of either, robotics in the physical world or digital creation by way of AI. It sounds an awful lot like the nightmarish world described by the Gnostics in the, early first millennium. And I think that they are in essence creating it. I think it's time that, humanity takes the ultimate red pill. You know the ultimate red pill?
What's that?
That the most potent metaphor the right has was created by two techno-Gnostic trannies.
We're going to leave it there. I didn't know that's how we were ending it. Another great show with Joe Allen. Go get Dark Aeon right now on sale over at Amazon for under $25. I want to thank you, Joe, for joining us. I want to thank you guys for joining us Monday through Friday here at Patriot.tv, where the truth lives. Remember this guy? It's not about left or right. It is always about right and wrong. I absolutely love you guys, and I'll see you on the flip side.